Welcome to Dialogue, ma'am. You know, if you take a look around the world, we see regional conflicts, crises, and probably one of the also biggest challenges is really about the tensions between the U.S. and China here. And of course, we are having, U.S. is together with South Korea hosting this another edition of a global democracy summit. By saying democracy, that means the U.S. is a democracy, China is not one. So that's part of the political differences or ideological differences between the country. How do you see the tensions between the two countries? In what way is impacting this global economic cooperation?
Well, you're right. We live in a very particular situation, and unfortunately, there is no clear way ahead what we are going to do. So we blame normally the COVID crisis, and everything turned in a very negative position afterwards. What worried me is related with my background. I lived in two systems. The previous one, the socialist system, which we totally changed into a market economy. We were taught and we weren't, and we did a big transformation of our government-led economy to a market economy. And what was this? Privatization, liberalization of prices, and open borders for trade and for investment. Now, what we do? Totally different. So it seems to me that we are going back to the past, which we rejected to continue, and we transform. So we have benefited a lot from open market for foreign goods and our goods to be traded abroad, and also investment. We had periods of our life when we had 15% of our economy dependent fully on foreign investment. So now we changed the whole paradigm. For example, recently the European Union adopted mechanism for screening of foreign investments from countries outside from European Union for the purpose of national security. So all of a sudden everything became national security. So this is a big challenge that we change the things not in the right direction to me.
Mm-hmm. If you focus on the China-U.S. relationship here, obviously we are seeing the U.S. is making efforts to rebuild this supply chain, for example, or decoupling from China. We do see de-risking, EU-China too here. And some people say, the key differences is between the political systems or ideologies, But at the end of the day, it's really about, whether it's effective, whether it delivers. Isn't that, shouldn't that be the judgment or the standards of if we want to judge the performance of a system?
Yeah, I like your comment very much. So let's go back to the history. We cannot apply our concepts of democracy to China. We cannot apply our national concepts of democracy to any other country. But China is different. Let me remark that in the past, when we had socialist system, China was different. China is always different. We have to learn about China. We are not the one to teach China what to do. Democracy is about what the people want and how much they want freedom of everything, or let's remember what Plato was saying, that democracy is the rules and somebody should impose the rules. While Thomas More, for example, he was considering democracy as a society that the state is very important to distribute all the resources to the people. So there are so many different types of democracy, but this is what we wanted, as much we wanted. I lived in the previous system when we didn't have private property, we didn't have freedom to speak. Yes, I have all this now together in my country, but it doesn't mean that this is perfect system. The system is as perfect as the people want it, and I think that Chinese, at least since the Yellow River was flooding, Chinese know what they want. So this is their way. Live in their way.
Well, speak of that, of course, Chinese people or Chinese culture probably plays an important role, which stresses very much about, being pragmatic. Every system seems they have their own challenges and also their strength. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think so. Our democracy, the European democracy, is quite different from the American one. Why? Because in the past, when the Americas were conquered, the first one who took the boats were the people with entrepreneurial kind of spirit. Those who didn't want to move, they felt comfortable at home, they remained in Europe. And we are still the same. So Americans are different from Europeans in terms of taking risks. Look at our, for example, capital markets. How much flourishing is the American one, while we have more modest and more stable, more banking system. So you see that democracy as a concept is quite different. It depends on the substance, the culture, the people, how they behave, all this. So we are different. So I'm really very curious about how we could think that somebody could take into account our model of democracy. It is not perfect. Yes, it is not perfect. For example, gun shooting, all this, what is going on in the States, it is part of what Americans want, to have guns at home. This is not the culture in my country. We totally oppose this. So there are differences, and we have to tolerate the differences.
You mentioned several interesting points here. One of them is probably let's say the Chinese model, if we can say so. There are state-owned companies, there are private companies, there are big companies, there are small and medium-sized companies, foreign companies. It's kind of a mix. It's very hard to probably define according to the, traditional economic theory probably. But the key point is over the past 40 plus years, it worked and is quite successful if you look at the growth of the Chinese economy. Is that the case? Can we say so?
Yes. China did a remarkable progress. So within the current political system to do such kind of progress, but let's don't look only on the past. Let's look at the present. China does green transition, which we dream to have in Europe. So it is very well planned, a remarkable progress, one by one. So China is doing something which is even more difficult for us to do, although the model, democracy, and a lot of, but what we learned from China, I think, is that we are trying to do green transition in our economies more led by the government, which will fail. We are not China. We cannot do what China does. The problem is basically, we go to your direction. We have the European Union with the rules and procedures, directives, regulations, so let's do it. What China does is that green transition is civilization choice. So we have to recognize that it is not the government. It is what we want to do. And we have to do more. Separating the garbage, turning off the lights, all these things help. Talking about only money, you'll get this money if you close down this enterprise, it doesn't work. So I think that China is, everybody deals now with slowdown of the economic growth of China. Yes, China's economic growth, by the way, it always exceeds the forecast for the Chinese economy. But what China does is what the world does. If you have a recession in Germany, if you have more countries in European Union, let's face it, we have in European Union less economic growth than Russia and Ukraine, which are in a war. So we are so much interconnected that if China slows down, partly this is due to the overall situation and the debut of the most awful way of protectionism we are creating, which is, of course, China will be affected by this.
We know that the EU has launched an unprecedented investigation into a Chinese train manufacturer for allegedly using subsidies, to undercut the European suppliers or competitors. Of course, this is following another investigation, let's say, last year into the EVs, electric vehicles from China. So in what way, these kind of, let's say, investigation or possible limits, for example, will also affect or may affect China and Bulgaria's trade and economic relationship?
We are in a circle of protectionist measures taken by many countries to protect their domestic market, which I'm liberal economist. I strongly believe that this is wrong. It could help to defend your local market to a certain period of time, but sooner or later you go to high inflation and consumers will suffer. So there are so many damages from this kind of policy, which are proven by so many economists in the last since Adam Smith, so more than 300 years. It was proven that this kind of creating obstacles doesn't help to the economy. But we are in this circle, at least on the side of European Union. Look, I think that it is very much related with the WTO debate. Should we continue with liberalizing more or liberalizing less? If we talk about subsidies, let's go to the WTO. We failed to negotiate this question of subsidies. We broadly subsidize our agricultural products. I mean, we European Union, you know that the new members like Bulgaria, we are not entitled to the same size of subsidies for agriculture as the old members of the European Union. So we are in a disadvantaged position anyway. But if we start talking about subsidies, there is no end of this story, because we do subsidize also in Europe. Everybody subsidizes explicitly or implicitly, brutally or intelligently, but we do subsidies. So we have to agree on this. Okay, if you subsidize cars, we have to talk about our subsidies or something else. It is like this. I was trade minister 20 years ago. And it was, trade is beautiful, but you need to have good strengths to negotiate.
That's true. Last year, for example, China had, contributed to the global economic growth by 30%, which is the same actually over the past 5-10 years. Do you think there's also probably lack of understanding or misunderstanding of the Chinese development? If you look at the U.S. efforts to decouple or European Union's efforts to de-risk from China, is a negative kind of trend in the European Union toward China, or relationship between the two sides? Is that the case?
I think that it is a political will in the West to decouple or to be emancipated from China. But currently, it is not possible, not only because of the value chains. The main issue is that we have slowed down the transformation into a more digital economy, to more high technologies. I mean, I'm thinking about the European Union and particularly my country also. So we cannot progress. We cannot catch up to China technologically without cooperating with China. Yes, we could, but this will cost a very prolonged period of catching up, too long and politically not acceptable for our democratic societies. So we are in a very, very difficult choice, very sensitive choice now. And we should learn from China to be more, you mentioned this, pragmatic and calm. This will help us catching up with technology and all these things, and in the same time, not interrupt what we have built already as cooperation with China and European Union.
We need more dialogues, obviously. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
With that, we come to the end for today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.